Well, it's been a little bit since I've talked about a Disney movie, so let's jump back in and talk about the movie that I consider to be the last of the Silver Age. Sleeping Beauty. So Sleeping Beauty was released in 1959 and is one of those classic Disney movies that I'm pretty sure everybody in the world has seen at least once. Even if you might not remember everything, I'm sure that there's at least something in this movie that you do remember from your childhood. And that being said, this is for me the last of the true Silver Age Disney movies. Even though technically the Silver Age doesn't end until the death of Walt Disney and the release of the Jungle Book, but for me, I see the Silver Age broken up into really two categories. There's the movies that came out before and including Sleeping Beauty, and then there's the movies that came out after. There seems to be a very big difference in quality and animation style in these two camps, and this happened for a couple of reasons. For one, Sleeping Beauty was a very expensive movie to make. Sleeping Beauty was in production at the same time Walt Disney was building, Disneyland, and because of that venture, Walt Disney Animation didn't have a lot of money to play with, and this was the movie that Walt Disney had the least amount of direct oversight on because he was occupied with building Disneyland. And I don't know if this was because of that or if it just happened to be that way, but the budget for Sleeping Beauty just kept ballooning out of control to the point where the movie was almost canceled. They're about to scrap the whole thing if they couldn't deliver the movie on time and with as little ballooning of the budget as possible. But why was that budget ballooning in the first place? Well, Walt Disney wanted this princess movie to be unlike all the other princess movies. This was going to be Disney's third princess movie after Snow White and Cinderella, and he didn't want it to feel stale. He wanted to do something fresh with this movie, and so he gave instructions to his team to really go all in on this. He wanted it to look like a medieval tapestry. He didn't want it to be super literal. He wanted it to be kind of mythical. And the end result is some insanely beautiful backgrounds. They look as if a medieval tapestry with all of its intricate detail work and weird abstract kind of shapes and expressions were colored by Mary Blair. And as a purely visual experience, these backgrounds and the layers of backgrounds that they use with the multi-plane camera look incredible. There are times when the backgrounds look so photorealistic that you swear they just took pictures. But then there are other times when the art department gets really creative with the look and feel of this world. For instance, the wood that Aurora hangs out in is the weirdest and at the same time most beautiful wood that Disney has ever created. The way they drew the cliffs and the rocks and the hills and the square trees don't make a whole lot of practical sense, but it's just so aesthetically pleasing that I kind of give it a pass. Even though those trees, of course, are ridiculous. I mean, I can't believe I never noticed that before this time watching it. They're so strange. But looking at these backgrounds, you can really see where the money went. The money's on the screen. The only problem is that's still a lot of money to be thrown at the screen. So after this movie came out, Disney took on a new way to animate called the Xerox process, which I'll talk about more whenever I get around to doing 101 Dalmatians. But basically it made inking the cells a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient. But what is the story of Sleeping Beauty? Well, Sleeping Beauty may be the most fairy tale of all fairy tales that Disney has tried to adapt. Now, it's your classic story of good versus evil, of heroes and villains and true love conquering all. This is really your starter kit if you want to tell a classic fairy tale. But more specifically, the story is the king and queen are celebrating the birthday of their new daughter, Aurora. So you have the three good fairies. They come in and they bestow their gifts. One gives her the gift of beauty, one gives her the gift of song, and another one's about to give her a gift until boom, you have the dark, evil fairy Maleficent, who aside from Chernabog may be my favorite Disney villain ever. She is just so unapologetically evil and petty, but not in a cheap or cheesy way, but instead in a regal and authoritative and domineering kind of way, where you weirdly fear her and respect her a little bit because she has just such conviction in what she's doing, even though what she's doing is horrifying and evil and terrible, but she has the power to back it up. And what's just the icing on the cake is the fact that Eleanor Audley, yes, the same voice actress for Lady Tremaine in Cinderella, voices Maleficent here, and this is an even more perfect match because here the posh upper class British accent, the regalness that she brings to her voice is coming out of this figure that is so evil but walks so straight with great posture and authority that it just works. And whenever Maleficent is on screen, it is by far the best part of the movie in my book. But anyway, she is not happy that she was snubbed from being invited to this ceremony, and so she curses the child, but she doesn't curse her with something, you know, kind of small like bad breath, or she'll never find love and die an old maid. No, the curse that she gives is that before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she'll prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die. Yeah, she didn't say sleep like death like Angelina Jolie. No, she just said die. Maleficent ain't messing around. You don't invite her to a party, she will kill your kid. But since the blue fairy, no, not the blue fairy, the blue fairy Merryweather hadn't given her gift yet, she uses her gift to kind of undo the spell that Maleficent put on her, where it's not death, it's sleep until true love's kiss comes and wakes her up. Seems like a good plan, but even so, the king and queen and the fairies aren't taking any chances. The king orders all the spinning wheels in the land to be destroyed, and the fairies sneak away with Aurora to raise her in the woods alone, away from everybody else, away from Maleficent, and just raise her as a peasant girl in a cottage, you know, just to keep her safe for 16 years. And then 16 years go by pretty quickly. Aurora has grown up, Prince Philip has grown up, and Prince Philip, looking an awful lot like Will Scarlet, just happens upon her in the woods. He hears her singing and just has to find out who that fair maiden was. So they meet, and it's kind of cute, and they have a little song and dance together, and immediately they're ready to get married, because this is a fairy tale. So they are ready to get married. She comes back to the cottage and tells her fairy godmothers the good news, but they're not too into it because Aurora is engaged to Prince Philip, but they don't know that it's Prince Philip. So they're like, okay, listen, I gotta tell you who you really are. You're really the princess, and we've been kind of keeping you here for 16 years, keeping a low profile, but you're 16 today, so I guess it's time to go back tonight and reunite you with your parents and get you married to Philip. And she's not too thrilled about this idea, and really neither is Philip, because Philip also goes back to the kingdom and tells his dad that he's going to marry this peasant woman, and the dad's like, what? And remember when I said the stuff with Maleficent is the best thing in the movie? Well, that may be true, but my favorite individual scene in this movie is the Scump song between the two kings when they're talking about their kids getting married and the blessings on their houses and stuff, and they're just drinking wine, and they're clearly getting drunk, because at one point King Hubert gets offended and he reaches for a sword and he pulls out a fish and tries to actually fight him with the fish. You know, that's a cute, funny moment, but what really gets me is the minstrel, because he's just secretly filling up his mandolin or whatever instrument he's playing with wine, and he just drinking it on the side, and he's playing and drinking, and at one point he falls over under the table and just disappears from the scene completely, until the end when they pull up the tablecloth and they see him there and he's just knocked out. And that makes me laugh a bit harder than it probably should. But all this marrying the wrong person drama really doesn't add up to much, because Maleficent finds out who Aurora is, and when Aurora comes back to the castle and goes up into the tower to prepare for the big ceremony, Maleficent is there. And probably the most ominous shot that I've seen her in is when she just kind of lurks in the fireplace and it's all translucent and creepy. That is a beautiful shot. And she puts an enchantment on Aurora that leads her up into the catacombs or wherever, into some weird chambers, where of course she pricks her finger on the spinning wheel and passes out, to all of the fairies' surprise and horror. And at the same time this happens, Maleficent's goons go and kidnap Philip at the cottage, because, you know, you can't risk the true love's kiss, so they kidnap him, bring him to the coolest Disney villain lair ever. Just look at this. The Forbidden Mountain. It's all jagged and awesome and intimidating. It's so cool. It's like Bald Mountain, but somehow even more evil and twisted. It's great. And I think it's what the Black Cauldron wanted to be, but didn't really end up being at all. And it's here where Maleficent locks him up in the dungeon, but of course the fairies come and help him escape, and they give him the sword of truth and the shield of righteousness so that he can fully escape this castle and wake up Aurora. But Maleficent ain't having any of that, so she puts every barricade in his way. And it's really the climax here where I've always had a soft spot for this movie. The way that it builds in tension and intensity is masterful. At first, you know, she's just hurling lightning bolts at him and missing because he's a good rider, so he's swerving in and out of blasts. But then she goes and puts a fog over the castle. But he's not scared of that, so he keeps going. And then she puts thorns and thistles growing up all around the castle to physically stop him from coming in. But Philip's got that sword, so he's just hacking away at those thorns and he's making progress. So she has to physically come down from her castle, deal with him herself, and turn into a freaking dragon. Yeah, if you ever wanted to get my attention in a story at any age, really, just throw in a dragon and I am there, because dragons are awesome. And Maleficent turning into a dragon is no exception, because the fighting here is very intense, and the sound design of the snapping jaws and the flames and the choreography with Philip and his sword just hacking at this dragon. And of course the finale where he throws the sword into the dragon, stabbing her, she topples over and dies. Wow, that was intense, and probably not the kind of thing you would expect in the climax of something called Sleeping Beauty. Who knew that we would get a Disney animated adaptation of Siegfried slaying the dragon to rescue Broomhilda? But I'm not going to complain, because that climax held my attention when I was a kid, and it still holds my attention now. But after the dragon and Maleficent is gone, there's not a whole lot left to say. You know what happens. Of course, the prince kisses the princess, she wakes up, they get married, it's happily ever after, and they dance their way into the clouds, which, interesting enough, I believe was a holdover from Snow White, because they had this whole idea for an animated ballroom dance sequence of One Day My Prince Will Come that they ended up scrapping because it was too expensive to make. And they wanted to show Snow White meeting the prince in her dreams and them dancing in the clouds. But sadly that scene was never actually animated, but I would be surprised if this ending wasn't heavily influenced from that idea back in Snow White. And I think it works okay, but just don't watch this movie in the same day that you watch The Robe, because that movie also ends with a couple transitioning into the clouds, and that has very different implications. But that's Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty, and what do I think about it? I think it's pretty good. It holds up pretty well. The scenes with Maleficent are always the highlights of the movie. The climax with Philip and the dragon is one of the strongest and most engaging that has ever come out of the studio. And the comedic elements sprinkled throughout, but specifically with the two kings, is surprisingly funny. And of course, like I talked about in the beginning, the backgrounds are stunning. This is the kind of Disney movie that you could just put on mute and just admire the pictures as they go by. The only problems I really have with this movie is the fact that Aurora and Philip don't feel like fully developed characters. Actually, I take that back. Aurora is pretty developed, and we do spend a decent amount of time with her, and we do understand her wants and dreams and likes and dislikes, so yeah, she's alright, but I really would like to see more done with Philip, because this is the third Disney prince, and I feel like all three of them have gotten the shaft. They just have not been developed into interesting guys. And with Philip, it's especially frustrating because by the third act, this is basically his movie. He's the one that has to slay the dragon to escape Maleficent, to defeat her, and rescue Sleeping Beauty. And so it would be nice to really understand who he is and where he's coming from and what it actually takes for him to overcome Maleficent, and we don't really get that here, so that's kind of frustrating. And the other issue I have with this movie isn't so much an issue with the movie itself, it's just a personal preference thing. I don't love the animation style of this movie. I love the backgrounds. The backgrounds are great. I've already gushed about them. But really the character designs and animations, except for Maleficent, who's awesome and nearly perfect by Disney villain standards, and it's a great design, it works, but all the other characters just feel kind of flat and two-dimensional. And I know it's kind of part of the whole like medieval tapestry style that they're going for, but it just doesn't immerse me like a lot of the other Disney movies do. But that is just my opinion, and now I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about Sleeping Beauty? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.